A deafening screech of grating metal filled the elevator as the doors struggled to open. To the passengers' gratitude, it was soon replaced by the regular clicking and whirring of gears as the doors began to open smoothly. The light from the platform flooded the dimly lit, filthy elevator carriage. Ladies with their corset-bound bodies in modest dresses, and gentlemen wearing top hats, dapper suits, and walking with canes exited the elevator and stepped out onto the platform. Then, as awkwardly as they had opened, the doors closed. The last person to exit the elevator was Percival Bates. He was a man who looked average in every conceivable way. He was the average height for a man in London in 1873. He didn't look particularly fatter or thinner than anyone else. His clothing matched the other gentlemen around him. He walked with no swagger or unusual gait, which would make him stand out. He was clean-shaven and wore a white shirt, a brown waistcoat, and a black unbuttoned jacket. He carried with him a plain brown leather briefcase. His trousers were black and ordinary-looking. His top hat was the same. For ease of breathing in the smoggiest of times, he carried a gas mask. This currently hung loosely around his neck. Under his jacket, on his side, he carried a revolver. The carrying of weapons, too, wasn't unusual in London in this era of rampant crime. All in all, Percival Bates didn't stand out in any way. The ordinariness of Percival's attire and demeanour wasn't an accident. He was, by profession, what was called a target trader. Target traders were hired assassins, dispensers of personal justice for those who could afford it. It was a truly lawless age in Britain. He had intentionally honed his appearance and demeanour so that he would blend in. Percival looked at his pocket watch. He noted that the train would be along shortly. He replaced the watch into the breast pocket of his waistcoat. Only mere seconds had passed, however, before the large brass announcement horn, positioned overhead, roared out. The passengers waiting on the platform shuddered in union with shock. "We regret to announce the delay of the next train bound for Mansion House," a dispassionate voice announced. "Please stand by for further announcements." The announcement didn't shock Percival, since the trains were reliably unreliable. However, he could recollect only once before having heard an announcement for a train's delay in the decade since the Underground's opening. He knew, therefore, that he was in for a long wait. Percival rummaged through his trouser pockets for a threepenny bit. Pulling the coin out, he checked it was correct and headed over to the platform's Vink-Bev vending machine. The riveted iron body of the vending machine was filthy. There were posters pasted over older posters, displaying the new drinks that the Vink Temperance Beverage Company had had to offer over the years. He pushed the coin into the slot. As Queen Victoria's image on the coin disappeared into the machine, it clattered into life. Whirring and chugging could be heard from the inside, and the brass selection levers popped out of the front all at once. Percival's hand hovered between a lever labelled Vink Gooseberry Cordial and another one labelled Vink Strawberry and Lemon Sparkling Cordial. He pulled the lever for the latter. All the brass levers then withdrew flush with the body of the machine. A glass bottle popped out of the hole at the bottom of the machine. It had an elegantly designed label with artistically drawn silver lines, beautifully intricate typeface, and colourful illustrations of strawberries and lemons. The label contoured gracefully around the Vink Bev emblem which was stamped into the glass. Percival pushed on the metal closure surrounding the top of the bottle, and the hard rubber stopper popped out. He took a swig. The sweet, sparkling drink flowed down his throat. It gave him some semblance of momentary relief from the acrid, smoky air of the station. "That's better," he murmured to himself with a sigh of contentment. He pulled his clicker from its pouch on his hip and looked at the paper display. It showed the last part of some news article Percival had been reading earlier that day. The article spoke about economic worries that were brewing in Vienna. It was printed in dark green ink, indicating that the printing ribbon was running out. The regular colour of the ink was black. Percival had, as usual, ignored this warning. He then realised he hadn't refreshed the clicker's data all day. He wandered over to a clicker terminal on the platform. Placing his briefcase on the ground, Percival pulled the retractable cable that was compatible with his clicker. He pushed it into a hole on the side of the clicker's elegant brass and wood casing. A long time ago, this would have been met with a reassuring snap, but now it was replaced with a spongy, uncertain looseness. Percival's clicker was a General Miracles Valorous Lion model. It was considerably outdated, but he liked it all the same. There was a crack on the glass frontage of the device made by some past accident. The clicker interfaced with the terminal using a flexible shaft cable, passing data back and forth using rotary motion. Once the miniaturized clockwork internals of the clicker were ready, a small bell rang. On the terminal, Percival pushed a refresh correspondence button. Again, the terminal began to pass data to the clicker. Moments later, a second ringing could be heard. The miniaturized typewriter carriage at the top of the device began wildly flailing around left and right. Inside the device, tiny typewriter characters were struck against the ink ribbon and left their mark on the paper display. Line by line, it scrolled down so that the message could be read. Percival's clicker had a curious quirk. While the characters had been being cast, the A character had had a bubble form on the crossbar. This left the character looking like an upturned V. He found it a charming thing, though. It made his clicker truly unique. The message had finished printing. His eyes scanned the paper. Sender, Emily. Date, the 3rd of April, 73. Message, Percy, please be careful. Someone came asking about you today and... The message stopped. The ink ribbon had run out. Percival thought that the next words could have been, I think. They were, however, only impressions in the paper and were too faint to read. The clicker had recognized the ink ribbon had run out and had stopped typing abruptly. The bell rang a third time, indicating that the process was finished. He removed the cable from the side of the clicker and it retracted back into the terminal. He regarded the message. He pondered what it could have meant. He wound out the message by twisting the knob on the side of the clicker. Pulling the guillotine splicer lever on the back, he detached it from the roll. Percival folded up the message, placed it into his waistcoat pocket, and finished his drink. He picked up his briefcase and walked back to the crowd of waiting passengers. The glass bottle was left sitting on the shelf of the terminal. The wait was excruciatingly long. Suddenly, the strange silence of dozens of waiting people was sharply broken by the imminent arrival of the train. Whistles, the sound of screeching and braking, and other various noises of machinery came rushing from the tunnel. A blast of air preceded the arrival of the train. Then, in an instant, the platform was filled with darkness, dust, smoke, and deafening noise. The train's light could only just about be made out in the gloom. Once the smoke had subsided, the platform once again became visible. The great double-decker underground train could be seen. Its riveted ironwork, blackened with soot, its grimy windows pretty much obscuring everything inside. It was magnificent. Passengers leaving the train were replaced by those getting on. Last of all, Percival went to the permanently open back door, grasped the brass barley twist bar, and heaved himself aboard. The lower deck of the train was full. There wasn't an inch of space on any of the benches that ran the length of the train, and there were few gaps in the number of the standing. Percival decided he would go to the upper deck, as it was usually less busy. As the train pulled off with a jolt, he climbed the spiral staircase that led to the upper deck. At the top, to his delight, he found the upper deck was empty, save for one, seemingly homeless, a man who was curled up along the benches at the front of the train. Percival walked around to the small area overlooking the spiral staircase and stood facing the blackened window. His slightly visible reflection stared back at him. Percival heard someone else coming up the stairs, but he didn't pay any attention. His thoughts flitted between the events of the day. Then he thought about Emily and her cryptic, incomplete message. It was at that point he felt it. Something was being pressed hard into his back between the shoulder blades. "Don't turn around," spoke a deep but somewhat youthful-sounding man's voice. The voice was muffled by the gas mask the person was wearing. Percival tried looking behind his reflection in the window to see who it was. However, there was nothing to see. His own reflection blocked any sight of the person who was holding him up. "Don't turn around," repeated the voice. "I have a gun placed at your back, and I am not afraid to use it." Percival felt the barrel push even harder against his spine. "What can I do for you?" Percival asked in a cool tone, trying not to betray any fear he might have had. "The book. I want it now." Percival let the demand sink in for a moment. Book was Percival's single-word question. "I don't have any book." There was a palpable agitation emanating from the unseen man. Percival recognized it. As a younger man, he had felt it too, back in the early days of being a target trader. This man was truly green. "Don't mess me about," started the voice. "I have it on good authority that you always carry it with you. Give it to me, or I'll take it from you and leave you dead." A faint memory returned to Percival, a conversation that had taken place a long time ago. Someone he had met in a bar, another target trader, who had told him about a kind of scam. The purpose of this scam was to use the services of a target trader without paying their fees for doing so. The perpetrator of the scam, wishing to have someone assassinated, would convince their intended target to undertake a seemingly lucrative task, promising substantial payment upon completion. This task, however, would be a ruse, often a retrieval mission for an item that did not exist, or something similar. The perpetrator would arm the victim with a gun for their protection, instructing them to use it should their target refuse to cooperate. Unbeknownst to the victim, however, the person they would confront would be a genuine target trader themselves. When the victim, misled and weapon in hand, demanded the non-existent item from the target trader, the situation was expected to escalate to violence. Believing themselves threatened, the target trader would then act in self-defense, eliminating the victim. This outcome, cleverly orchestrated by the perpetrator, would result in the death of their intended target at the hands of a professional without incurring the usual cost of the target trader's fees. It was known as cheating the trader. Percival was certain in an instant that that is what this was. "I don't have any book," Percival reiterated. "You don't know the mistake you're making, do you?" There was a short silence, and the feelings of tension rose between the two. "I assure you, Mr. Bates, I'm not the one making a mistake," the voice retorted. "Oh, you are," Percival began. "You think I am the target, when in reality it's you." The owner of the unseen voice snorted. "You've been sent to me on some wild goose chase that I can't possibly fulfill for you. You will be forced to attempt to kill me, and in turn, I'll be forced therefore to kill you. You're the target, not me. Now listen," the enraged voice started. However, it was prematurely cut short. In less than a second, Percival had done it. He had spun around, knocked the gun from the man's hand. He had pulled his own revolver from its holster and had shot the would-be assassin. The shot was square in the forehead, through his gas mask. The man stood dead on his feet for the longest time. The body fell to its knees and finally to the floor. Percival's heart pounded. He wasn't worried that the shot had been heard. Clearly it had, since the passengers on the lower deck could be heard muttering. He wasn't worried about that, however. People were shot dead on the underground all the time, and nothing was ever done about it. His worry or fear had come from seeing the diminutive stature of the person he'd just shot. Wiry thin, and a good foot shorter than Percival. Percival pulled up the gas mask, and immediately all his fears were realized. The dead man lying on the floor ahead of him, the person Percival had just killed, wasn't a man at all. He was just a boy, somewhere around 13 or 14 years old. Percival's face grimaced as guilt and shame pervaded his body. Oh, how he wished in that moment that he could undo what he had just done. His guilt, however, was short-lived. In an instant, it was replaced by a red-hot anger that burnt deep in his chest. He grasped the handle of his revolver so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. He holstered his pistol at his side and then took hold of the boy's body by the lapels of his jacket. He raised him onto the bench, albeit the boy was so malnourished that he barely weighed anything. Percival rifled through the boy's pockets, looking for anything, any clue that could point towards what had happened. Other than the gun the boy had been carrying, the only other thing that he had on his person was a single small, folded slip of paper. It was a page from a receipt book. The top of the page was the letterhead of a bookshop called Fletcher's Booksellers, Spitalfields. Spitalfields, Percival thought. It wasn't too far from where he himself lived in Whitechapel. He could have passed by this boy before without any idea of how their lives would cross, and ultimately this boy's life would end. A handwritten address was written on the blank space below the letterhead. It was the address of a very upmarket house in Kensington, very far from the down and dirty East End from where Percival and this boy came from. Percival looked at the note once more before folding it up and pocketing it. Down the carriage, the noise had awoken the sleeping man, who was now looking down at the sight. He eyed the dead boy, and then Percival. "You'll burn in hell for that one, target trader," he spoke matter-of-factly. "Someone will," replied Percival. He took one more look at the sorry-looking boy slumped down on the bench. "You stupid boy," he said, with an air of regret still present in his chest. Then Percival took his leave, down the staircase, briefcase in hand, to the door, just as the train pulled into Mansion House Underground Station.